Welcome, everybody, to the Fairness Campaign Speakers Summit, part of the BOND program. Through this series, we're holding a strong intention to recreate the bond in every aspect of our lives. And we're creating a new space of fairness also through our relationships in our community. And as we've personally witnessed, it can change your life and the lives of everyone around you and indeed those on the planet. So today we're welcoming a very special friend of mine and also a very special guest. His name is Arjuna Ardagh, and he's going to share with us his unique perspective on fairness, how to apply it, use it, and create it in your life. And also he's going to talk about the fact that he knows there's a better way to know yourself. And that's really the theme of this whole summit is I know there's a better way. We're trying to provide tools for a new world. Now, just a few words about Arjuna. First of all, he's a dear, dear friend of mine, but he's also a fantastic awakening coach. He trains others to be facilitators of awakening, and he'll explain to you exactly what he means about awakening shortly. He's the author of 7 books, including the #1 national bestseller, The Translucent Revolution, which is just a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, please pick it up. It was featured in O Magazine, a real favorite of Oprah's. He's also been working with people individually and in organizations since 1983 and has spoken all around the world. One of my favorite things about Arjuna is that he's English. And, of course, I live over here. I'm married to a Brit who's also a dear friend of Arjuna's. He hails from Cambridge University. And besides being very smart, he's also been a great spiritual seeker since the age of 14. He's had a passionate interest in spiritual awakening and has done a great deal of training in that area. And as well, he's living and walking the talk. He's developed a thing he calls living essence training. He's also working on all kinds of really interesting things. He interviews a lot of people and has done a wonderful series he's going to talk about called Living Awakening. And he's also done a fantastic book that he's working on with Gay Hendricks called Conscious Men. That, plus his work on what deeper love means, really gives him the credentials to give us a great deal of information about tools for a new world. So welcome, Arjuna. It's fabulous to have you here.
Wow, my knees are just trembling trying to live up to what you just said now. I feel like it's only been a disappointment after an introduction like that.
I don't think so. I have to say I've absolutely loved your book, The Translucent Revolution, and so much of the work that you do about falling awake, basically. So I wanted you to start by just defining your term translucence and what you mean by that, because that seems to be a real key word in your idea of awakening and a new tool for living a better life.
Sure. It's a really good place to start. So the word translucent is borrowed actually from the physical universe. You know, it's a word to describe physical objects. So an opaque object would be like a brick wall, you know. If you're inside your house and the sun shines on a brick wall, no light is going to pass through the brick wall. You could be, if you're in a room with no windows, you'd be in total darkness, right? So an opaque object doesn't allow light to pass through at all. A transparent object, a completely transparent object, allows light to pass through completely, right? So a transparent object would be like a completely clean sheet of glass, you know? Now, a translucent object, you could say, is halfway between, right? So a translucent object is like a crystal, like a rose quartz crystal. If light shines on a crystal, it appears to glow from within. It lights up from within. But so it retains its color, it retains its shape, it retains its inherent qualities, but it also it allows light to pass through it. So that's what a translucent person is. When they appear to glow from within, a translucent person emits light because they've been lit up from within, but they still retain their personal qualities. They still retain, you know, their little quirks, their little weaknesses, their likes and dislikes, their preferences. All that is still retained. Yeah.
But it's like that pure essence that you talk about in the book, that pure heart we start with, has come to the fore again.
Yeah, it's translucent means really that you have awoken to the dimension of you that is limitless, that is connected with everything, that is free. But so you've awoken to that dimension of yourself, but you are also not in any way in denial or resistance of your human incarnation. And so really, I use the word translucent to contrast with the word enlightened. And I'm, as you may know from my writings, I'm a kind of a passionate advocate of really kind of questioning the word enlightenment. Because enlightenment suggests an absolute state you arrive at, and then everything is kind of, you become infallible up to that. And it seems to me that enlightenment is a huge trap, both for people who call themselves seekers, because then they're constantly comparing their present-day human experience with some kind of perfection, but also teachers get trapped in enlightenment, where they can no longer be human, they can no longer make mistakes, because there's this idea of perfection. So translucence means that you have your human nature, you have your weaknesses, you have your little quirks, but you are aware of the ocean in which those waves are dancing.
I love that, Arjuna, because, as you say, so many people who are involved in or taking courses from the personal development movement think that there's a place of arrival, and that once they get there, they don't have to do any more work, and that all of those human foibles will fall away, and that's something to be desired. And what you're really saying is, no, it's more that you are, you're just aware, and it's an awareness rather than a striving for some new state that's really important.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. As always, you say it so much better than I could. You're so eloquent.
Do not. Absolutely so not. Cool, yeah. You're pretty articulate yourself, sir. I tell you what I've found really interesting was this whole idea of, you talk in the book about your habits of separation, and that's so much what I really wanted to talk about in the bond too. The idea that we've created habits of individuality, and we've kind of incarnated them in every aspect of our lives, from education and our educational model to business to our relationship model, even to our neighborhoods. God forbid our neighbors drive a Mercedes when we drive a Volvo. We've got this real sense of separation and competition, and that life is a real race to the finish line. And that sort of has been brought into spirituality too, isn't it? It's kind of it's been a very competitive thing too, that you really rail against, which I find fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great way to say it. I often describe enlightenment as the last nightmare, So, we get obsessed with, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I need to, get a better spouse. There's something wrong with me. I need to have more money. There's something wrong with me. I need to upgrade my airline ticket. There's something wrong with me. I need to improve my health. There's something wrong with me. I need to become a better person. And finally, when we run out of improvements, we latch onto this idea of enlightenment, which has been propagated mostly by Eastern male teachers, and we say there's something wrong with me, I'm not enlightened. It's the last nightmare, it's the last refuge of feeling there's something incomplete or missing. And so the huge quantum leap, in my mind, is not when you become enlightened. The huge quantum leap is when you finally cancel your subscription to the masochism of believing in enlightenment. And that is the huge explosion, when you realize there is nowhere to get. There is nothing to achieve, and there's nothing wrong with you the way that you are, which is not to say that you're in some way perfect, but the way that you are today is the inevitable, innocent consequence of conditioning. Anybody born with your family at that particular date, with this particular set of circumstances, would behave the way that you do. So let yourself off the hook. Life is just playing itself out as it needs to. We have some element of responsibility, of course, and awareness, but we can relax. We can relax and realize that the gift that we have to give is fully ready to be given now. We don't need to improve ourselves before we start becoming a bestower of blessings on the planet.
That was so brilliantly said. I mean, I absolutely agree, and I think this is the big problem people don't understand, is that it's already there. I think that what was such a mind blower for me in researching the bond was seeing the innate goodness of people, the desire consequently and constantly to connect, how we're really made to share, care, and be fair, and that's really all hardwired into us. We have this connection and this, if you want to say, this kind of, this transcendence that's built into us. It's hardwired into us, but we've been conditioned out of it. We've had the wrong training, whether that's individual or collective, and that seems to be the problem. And so, as you say, if you let yourself off the hook, that sounds like a real key tool for a new world. I mean, how do you go about letting yourself off the hook, so to speak?
Right. That's a really great question. Well, first of all, let me just pick up on something you said a little earlier, and it's I can't contain myself. You know, my tail is wagging so furiously right now, and my tongue is hanging out and dripping everywhere. I've just got to say, what an incredibly inspiring and a wonderful opportunity it is to have this conversation with you, because I think you're just one of the most sane, intelligent, provocative people putting out stuff today. So I've just got to say that, because I just can't hold it back that you're.
We have this mutual adoration society going on right here. So
yeah,
I shall say the reverse to you. So thank you.
I was just standing here on my deck, kind of trying to give you sane, rational answers to these questions, and inside I'm just jumping up and down, saying like, I'm having a conversation with Lynne McTaggart. Yay! So I had to get that out of my system. Okay. So
we're raising each other's game, Arjuna. So great.
Right.
So
tools. Isn't that the coolest thing? What better thing could we do on a Thursday than raise each other's game? So let's just get back to one thing you said, which I think I might have forgotten now. But you said something interesting
about raising. About the
big change. Okay. So as you mentioned in my bio, I went to Cambridge University. I went up, as they say. I went up to Cambridge in 1975, and I graduated with my master's in 79. And at that time, 75 to 79, most of the really smart people at Cambridge, most of the people I really hung out with who were interested in a better world were Marxists. Very, very strong Marxist elements in Cambridge then. And, spirituality and stuff was really a little bit, weird people who wore, socks and sandals at the same time. We're into spirituality, but it was kind of not cool, But it was clear to me back then, in 1975, I was 18, it was really clear to me at that time that there is no political solution. There really, and I can remember when I was 18 writing papers about this, there is no political solution, there is no economic solution. Because essentially...
solution to what? So you mean solution... There is no ultimate great economic system?
There is no solution to our predicament as a race as we stand today. I mean, we could feel this coming back in the 70s. It wasn't so dire as it is now. But back in the 70s, they had this clock, and they were saying, how many seconds are we away on the clock from extinction, So there was this ticking clock, and it was all to do with the nuclear bomb at that time. But I remember at that time saying, really passionately debating, there is no political solution, there is no economic solution, because it's what Einstein said, Einstein said, you cannot solve any problem in the same state of consciousness in which it was created. That is the kind of quote everyone should tattoo on their arm, You cannot solve any problem in the same state of consciousness in which it was created. So the political problems we have on the planet, the problems of conflict in Northern Ireland, between different kinds of Muslim in Iraq, all of these problems, they're created out of a state of consciousness which is predominantly about separation, and you can't solve those problems in the same state of consciousness in which they were created, right? The economic disparity in the world, which is now, as you probably know, is way out of control. We don't necessarily realize this, but since 1970, the disparity between rich and poor in the United States is 3 or 4 times greater than it was then. These amazing statistics, which I've got in the Translucent Revolution, we don't realize that today much more of the wealth is held by much fewer people than it was even 3 decades ago. And so we see this huge problem of national debt, and we see this enormous problem. Greece just had to get bailed out. Looks like Spain and Italy and Portugal are right behind. So the euro is actually right on the edge of a huge economic collapse, right? And Greece is a good example. So excuse me for getting so passionate. Greece is a good example because you say like Greece is in this terrible crisis. What's actually happening in Greece is very similar to America. There's a huge rift between socialists and what we would call Republicans, right? So actually what's happened in Greece is tons of money has been siphoned out of the system and put in Swiss bank accounts by business people. And so all the money's been bled out of the country, and now the country's going bankrupt, you see. So that's a problem. That's an economic problem. So why do people do that? Why would anybody amass way more money than they know what to do with? Because of their state of consciousness, because they feel lack. One amazing thing I learned about when I was researching Translucent Revolution was that in Indonesia, they were cutting down the old-growth teak forests. So teak is this beautiful wood. They were cutting them down, putting them on ships, going out to sea in these ships, and 200-300 miles offshore, dumping the teak into the ocean, into the middle of the ocean. All right? And we ask ourselves, why would anyone do that? The answer is it was the Japanese, right? The Japanese were buying up all the teak, clear-cutting the forest, dumping it in the ocean to maintain the price of teak that was already on the market. I mean, unbelievably short-sighted, to jeopardize the future of our children to make a quick buck, not even to sell the teak, just to get it off the market so that they can maintain the price of what they've got. So what kind of person would do that? Somebody who's feeling fear, someone who's feeling not enough, someone who's feeling desperate under any circumstances to be able to get a little more for me, you see? So it's ironic that actually the more money people accumulate very often, the more sense of lack is driving them. So you can't solve the problems we have on this planet by economic and political means. That may be a part of it, but what we've got to do is change consciousness. And that was why, when all my friends were going to Marxist rallies, I was practicing meditation when I was 18, 19, because I realized that was the only solution, was to change our state of consciousness.
That is absolutely so right on, because that's really where it starts. I mean, we're aware, as you say, America is at its most unfair in history. I mean, I was shocked by the statistics. It's something like 1% of the population controls 40% of the money. And we now have a situation where 1 in 39 Americans is a millionaire, but 39 million people live below the poverty line now. They live on, many of those people on food stamps. 39 million, 1/10 of American population. And so and the amazing thing that we demonstrate is that you see in the science and the reason that I'm so involved with unfairness and looking for and creating this fairness campaign is that when things are unfair like this, everybody loses, rich and poor, because there is such a state of lack, as you say, there is such a state of hoarding that what ends up happening is that everybody loses on all the major social indicators, on health care, on crime, on education. Everybody's worse off as a result. And America, at the moment, of all Western countries, has all the worst social indicators. So this is driven by that sense of unfairness, and on an individual level, as you're talking about, it's by this feeling of lack. So what's a tool? This is really important and the nub of what we're talking about, because as you say, it starts with you and it starts with me. What's a tool for starting to overcome that sense of lack that's driving so much of us, so many of us?
So I mean, I think what I'd like to do, if I may, is give you a kind of over the course of our entire conversation, give you like a a graduated series of tools, because there is, I think, there are starter tools that get you warmed up, and then there are deeper tools. So let me start with a starter tool. The place to start all of this is to learn to question and to distrust your mind. Now, way back in the 90s, in the late 90s, I wrote a book called How About Now, which actually remained, we just published it ourselves. It wasn't a huge success as a book. But in this book, How About Now, I talked about the concept of your crazy uncle, So I want to just present it to you. Imagine you go, you could be an aunt too, but your crazy relative. Imagine you go to the shopping mall, if you're in America, with your crazy uncle, right? And you went to the mental asylum to check him out. You had to sign and give your cell phone number and everything, but you managed to get your crazy uncle out of the mental asylum, and you take him for an afternoon outing to the shopping mall. Okay? And so now you're going through the shopping mall with your uncle, who's kind of about 2 steps behind you, mumbling, drooling a little bit, and kind of fiddling with things, And as you're walking through the shopping mall, your crazy uncle is in a murmur. He's just whispering to you, like, "Be careful, they're out to get you. Don't look at her. She's an FBI agent. Be careful, somebody's going to try and kill you. You better watch out. Don't give anybody your money. Don't tell anybody your cell phone number. It's very dangerous here." And he just keeps this monologue up, right? Now, if you know that your uncle is crazy, and you've only checked your uncle out of the mental hospital for a few hours, you're going to be compassionate. You're going to say, "It's okay, uncle. I know that you feel a little upset, and I know that things are a little scary, but it's not real. Don't worry. It's all good.
Yes.
It's all good. Relax. Take it easy." And so you can allow. It's not like you're going to turn around to your uncle and say, "Shut up! Stop talking! Don't say any more." You can be compassionate with your uncle and say, "I know you feel scared. I know you feel upset, but don't worry. It's all good, right?" So we need to take the same relationship to our minds, you see, because the mind, and people sometimes say, "Oh, you mean like 80% of our thoughts?" No, I mean 100% of our thoughts. All of our thoughts, basically, are arising out of conditioning, and all of the conditioning is oriented towards separation. All of the conditioning is oriented towards there being a you and a me that's separate, and therefore to get my needs met, I need to be strategic and manipulate and negotiate with what you perceive your needs to be. Okay? So this is the nature of the mind. It's a strategic tool to negotiate through a world that appears to be separate. So the place all of this starts is to learn to question your mind. Simply to start to relate to your mind the way that you relate to your crazy uncle, which means you don't try to shut it up. People sometimes think that meditation or some kind of spiritual practice is to quiet the mind, and there's no such thing as a quiet mind. That would be like dry water. You can't have a quiet mind. A mind, the word mind means mental activity, so it can't be quiet. It is noisy, and there's no need to stop it being noisy. In fact, trying to stop it makes it more active. The thing is simply to recognize that it's not reliable. It's not reliable in any way whatsoever. So you start to question it. And a good way to start that is with a question that I present in Leap Before You Look, which is my most recent book. So to work constantly with the question, is it true? Just to ask this question, is it true? So every time, you can do this with your partner. You and Brian could do it together, or I do it with Shamali. But when you hear your partner say, "Oh, there's not enough money," then you just ask, is it true? And you realize that most of what you consider to be fact, most of what we consider to be hardcore reality is just an opinion, and the opposite opinion is equally true and equally untrue. So that's a really good place to start, is maybe 10 times a day, have a little notebook, just write down some kind of mental conclusion that your mind has come up with, and then ask, is it true? There's the first tool.
That's an excellent tool. I like that so much, because I like the idea of trying not to negate the crazy uncle, because, as you say, so much spiritual practice is all about, and people feel they fail because then they feel, in a way, it's an unfairness to people, to individuals, to make them feel that they have to turn off this mind, which by its very nature is active mental activity, as you say. And it's unfair to think that the desired state is something where it just doesn't operate anymore. It just doesn't see and notice and recognize and carry on the narrative. But what I like about it is what you're saying is it's just an unreliable narrator. And so you have to understand that it's going to continue to narrate your life, but just don't pay it quite so much mind. So I like that a great deal. I love what you write about, too, about the whole idea of the return of the goddess and feminine as a tool of enlightenment. Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think everyone's aware that, for nobody's fault in particular, our entire global culture really has been dominated by the masculine for, it seems like around 5,000 years, give or take, There have been pockets of feminine, of cultures which celebrated the feminine more. The Judaic tradition actually is an example where feminine energy was more welcomed and celebrated. And of course there's, the Egyptian Isis culture and so on. But certainly all the world's major religions, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, etc., all founded by men and propagated by men. Very important. Founded by men and propagated by men. So until very recently, we only had male priests in the Christian tradition. There still are only male imams in Islam, and Buddhism has also been very much oriented towards the monk rather than the nun, statistically. So we think we know what is spiritual awakening or spiritual life. But actually we don't. We don't know what that is. What we know is the masculine expression of those things, because all of the major traditions were expounded by men. There's a wonderful book by Stephen Mitchell, Byron Katie's husband, came out years and years ago, called The Enlightened Heart, and there's a companion volume called The Enlightened Mind. These are collections of kind of so-called enlightened poetry and prose. And if you look through the index, almost everybody quoted is a man, because that was the only reference we've had for spiritual awakening was masculine expression. Now, men, just to put it very briefly, men, the masculine psyche in all of us, men and women, the masculine psyche tends to be goal-oriented, right? So what do men like to watch on a Saturday afternoon on TV? Football. What's football all about? Breaking through barriers to get to a goal and having this moment of release, you see? So men, they make everything about reaching goals, or the masculine psyche makes everything about reaching a goal. So in business, which has been very dominated by men, we want to make a breakthrough, we want to, launch a strategy, launch a campaign, make a killing. These are all words from warfare, you see. And of course war. War is an activity where eventually somebody wins, and then they're the victor, and they celebrate their victory at somebody else's expense, right? So if you give spiritual awakening to the masculine to take care of, if you say to the masculine, okay, you can look after the spirituality, the masculine is going to make spirituality about a goal. And that's how the concept of enlightenment got to be so prevalent, because if men are given something to take care of, they're going to translate it into breakthrough barriers in time, through austerity, through pressure, through effort, and reach a goal. Now, we're only starting to see, really now, what feminine awakening looks like, because we're just really starting to celebrate that in the last few decades. And I'm proud to say that my beloved wife, Shamali Ardagh, is one of the leading exponents of feminine spirituality. She has the Awakening Women Institute. She teaches all over the world feminine spiritual practice. So let's think about women, you see, well, the feminine heart. Feminine people, they don't watch football on the TV on Saturday unless they're doing it to please their men. What women generally like to watch, and this is stereotyping, I know, but there's some validity to it all the same. What women tend to like to watch on the TV is, dramas about feelings, right? It's like, oh, she's walking towards him. She's going to tell him finally that she loves him, but he's turning away. He's proud. He's looking out of the window. She's moving towards him. She puts her hand on his back. Oh, I can't bear it, Reach for the Kleenex. Oh, my God. Are they going to kiss? No. But the phone rings and he walks away. Oh, my God. And so, Shamali and other women I know will watch these intense dramas that sometimes involve great suffering, and they're sobbing and crying. It's so moving. And at the end, they've Shamali's watched like Schindler's List or something that's incredibly tragic. And I'll say to her, like, whoa, that was a depressing film. And she said, no, it was wonderful. And it was wonderful because it gave her the opportunity to completely feel, to totally feel her feelings in this moment. So basically, I would say the feminine heart, just as the masculine is about pushing through a journey in time towards a goal, the feminine heart is all about completely feeling this moment, feeling texture on your skin, noticing smells, noticing the subtle shifting of emotional energy in your body. The feminine heart is all about the subtlety of feeling. So if you now give the feminine a chance to look up to spirituality, it becomes all about now, all about embodiment, all about feeling into this moment, you see. And this is the return of the goddess. Now, this is incredibly important because I don't think we're going to see on this planet a domination by women. A lot of men are afraid that feminism, the rise of feminism, is somehow going to translate to matriarchy or domination of men by women. And I think men are only afraid of that because they are so into domination, they think that women are going to do the same. But actually,
yes.
I think what we're going to see on this planet, what we're seeing emerging now, is a balance of masculine and feminine energy, where there is a total celebration and respect of both the masculine and the feminine at the same time, which creates a synergy greater than the sum of their parts. It creates synergy, which is a new expression. And I know you and Brian know this. I know that, so many people I interviewed for The Deeper Love know this, and Shamali and I know this. What happens when a man and a woman completely celebrate masculine and feminine energy as equal and equally valid? You get something emerge that is beyond each one alone. And this, I think, is an incredibly important part of the healing that we're happening. This is very relevant to the bond, you see, because and this and the sense of community, because women are really all about connection and community. Men tend to create hierarchy. Women tend to create circles. They like circles. They like community. They like everyone to have a voice. And this is going to initiate a very different way of having economics and politics and having social structures when the feminine has more chance to participate.
Absolutely. And as you say, it's so part of the bond, that sense of putting yourself, as tried to write in the bond, this idea of putting yourself as a vehicle of service to the relationship, to the connection, and looking for the feeling, the connection, rather than being right, rather than trying to dominate, to debate, to win the argument, to figure out what is in it for me. So that connection, that different kind of way of relating, coming back to the individual, which is, and the person's toolkit for change, individual change, how does one move from that idea of being so goal-oriented to working toward being more feminine in the connection and looking more for the connection rather than the domination?
Yeah, well, I think, one great practice that anyone can adopt, and I actually like to do this at night because it kind of gives you a very good sleep, is at night, before you go to sleep, before you actually allow yourself to sleep, you give expression of gratitude for 25 things in your life. 25 things that happened that day that are just like amazing blessings that are not your entitlement. They were given to you as an extra. So, when I do this every night. I sometimes do it with Shamali. We kind of share it together. So, I'm just beyond words grateful for the wife that I share my life with. I was just sharing with you earlier that we recently had a cancer scare where we thought she had cancer, and the doctors all thought she had cancer, and it turned out she didn't. But this has given me a really renewed sense of, overwhelming gratitude to share my life with this incredible woman. I've got 2 incredible sons, who are doing so well in every way. So now I'm up to 3, and then I'm really grateful for the orange drink, a kind of organic orange drink that I had last night. It was like a little soda can of orange drink, organic, and I'm realizing so few people in the world have access to high-quality beverages like that, you know. And then I'm also remembering the cherries that I ate that were organic and tasted so good. Now I'm up to 5, you see. By the time I've gone through 25 things I'm grateful for that are not my right, they are not my right because so many people on the planet don't have access to any of this, I am immensely blessed. And it kicks you into a perspective of, oh my God, you know, I am already swimming in success. I'm already swimming in blessing. I'm drowning in being blessed. And that kind of takes the edge off trying to get more and better, you know. A good example, you probably saw that YouTube video about, you know, how we forget the miraculous, and he gives the example of being on an airplane, you know, and people complain about their seat and their upgrade, and they overlook the incredible miracle that we're sitting in this chair flying through the air at 30,000 feet. That alone, wherever you happen to be sitting on the plane, that alone is a complete miracle. Oh my God, you know. Or you know, we get irritated when the internet goes down. So for a few minutes, we can't actually talk to somebody else on the other side of the world through Skype and actually see the other person in fairly good quality and see them look back at us and feel their energy through their eyes, and then we complain, oh my God, the internet went down, I can't Skype, that's so irritating. Excuse me, you have the opportunity to do something that for, you know, hundreds of millions of years no one's been able to do, you know, and a lot of people on the planet still can't do. I mean, what an amazing, amazing, amazing miracle that you can actually see and hear and communicate with somebody far away. Let's not get too entitled about all of these blessings, you know. So as we shift into gratitude as a practice, it's going to naturally dissipate our sense of goal orientation and ambition.
Well, that is so great. And as you say, forgetting the miracle, that's just so much part of it. Now, speak to what about just now? Let's speak to the just right now, because fear is really overtaking us. I mean, we are awash in crises right now. You know, we've got the financial crisis, the foreign debt crises, we've got ecological crises, we've got extreme weather crises, we've got, you name it, crises. And so many people are out of work now. So many people have lost their home in America. What about them? When they feel life is so unfair, when they see, say, bankers who are awarding themselves record bonuses for, you know, and rewarding themselves when the very, you know, financial crisis was orchestrated by them, the very thing that is creating a problem for so many of these other people. How do we deal with them? How do we deal with their senses of unfairness? Because, you know, we know this in our bones. So how do they individually start trying to create life that's more fair for themselves?
Okay, well, this is beautiful you asked me this, because it's a question I've not actually answered before. So I'm going to give you a kind of live transmission of whatever I can come up with on that.
That's absolutely great.
Yeah, you know, I tell you where I'm at. I can just tell you personally, and I think I'm very much at a cutting edge with this right now. I think where I'm at is I've had quite a few things happen to me in the last couple of years that appeared to be grossly unfair. For example, I was working on a project with a colleague that we spent 9 months on. You know, I did the lion's share of the work. You know, writing and researching and a lot of stuff. And then, you know, something came up and my colleague pulled out of the project, you know, and leaving me, you know, feeling pretty betrayed, you know. And so there was maybe there was a night, you know, there was a night there of feeling it's so unfair, you know. I mean, there were justifications for why this seemed like a reasonable thing to do, but in my mind, the justifications weren't sufficient for the behavior. So I spent a night, you know, feeling incredibly unfair. But you know what happened? Then I can think of many other things, you know. I mean, then we mentioned earlier how Shamali got this false diagnosis. Well, that wasn't fair, I suppose. Also, that the doctor said she had cancer when she didn't, and we went through this whole thing. And many things have been unfair, you know. Many things, business things are unfair. So for me, you know, I think the way I've come to terms with this is to recognize, and this sounds like an old cliche that parents would have said, that life, as we live it, as we know it on the planet, is not fair. Fairness is not what's on offer here, in terms of,
yes.
And I think we can split this into two things. We can split this into the fairness or unfairness we receive, and then the fairness or unfairness that we give, right? So in terms of the
absolutely,
fairness...
Yes. And I think that's really your key thing, too, because it's sort of, life is unfair, but we don't have to be.
Exactly. So in terms of other people doing things that seem unfair, I think the best thing is just to accept, okay, that person only did that because of their state of consciousness. That person only did that thing because they're feeling somehow tight or irritable or contracted or, fearful, or they just don't know better. And so that's the best they could do under that circumstance. It seemed like the right thing to them to do. And, if it was somehow not in alignment with the flow of life, it's going to come back to them. They're going to taste the fruits of that same behavior from somebody else until they learn how to behave decently. So if somebody treats you with unfairness, best thing I would say is go, well, what do you expect? That's how life is. On the other hand, we do have an opportunity, you and I and everyone we know, we do have an opportunity to choose to be as fair as we possibly can. And that sounds like, very altruistic and saintly, but actually it's very selfish. It's very selfish, because if you choose moment to moment to bring as much fairness as you possibly can to your interactions with other people, you actually develop a different relationship with yourself. Very quickly, if you really make this a practice, very quickly you start to experience yourself as a fair and good person. You start to rely upon yourself as somebody you can count on to treat people well. And that actually, that is such a sweet thing. It can't be really described, and it's something I've really been working with. I just had a situation recently where I paid somebody to perform a service for me, and we agreed upon the price. Here was the price, and here's what they had to do. And this person had some mitigating circumstances, had some serious challenges. You've been talking about people losing their house and all kinds of stuff. This person had some very serious challenges and didn't perform what they said they would do in the time period. And they contacted me and said, I didn't do what I said I'd do. And I fell into this and I said, well, okay, so you didn't do what you said you would do, but what I said I would do is pay you this money. And so I'm going to pay you the money anyway because it's what I said I would do, right? Because you broke your word, which I'm sure you'll put straight, it doesn't mean I have to break mine. So I actually went ahead and paid the full amount, even though the service hadn't been rendered. And I got to tell you, that was such a great investment in myself. I mean, you could call it wasting money, but it was such a great investment in myself to recognize, I'm a good, generous person who keeps my word. And I mean, that may be one time that I did that out of 99 when I didn't, but it's a step in the right direction. And the more you actually treat people with incredible fairness, the more you fall in love with yourself, the more you trust yourself, and the more you start to chip away at the shell of false identity and discover the dimension where you are one with God. So to Jesus, Jesus is famous for saying, I and the Father are one. And I always want to ask people, Christians, it's like, when we hear I and the Father are one, do we want to make Jesus into the great exception or the great example? When Jesus says I and the Father are one, is it only true for Jesus and the rest of us are just little bits of doggy doo-doo on the side of the road? Or when Jesus says I and the Father are one, can that be true for all of us? And when you treat people in alignment with your heart, when you treat people with generosity and kindness, you start to open up the dimension of yourself where who you are and what God is the same. And there's nothing better you could do for yourself than that. I mean, that is the jackpot, to have that channel open.
I think, and that was just so beautifully said, Arjuna. And I think what's so amazing about that, when you do, as you say, it's the most selfish thing, because it ties you back into who you really are. Because we know from all the science that we have automatic "it's not fair" buttons in our brain. They ring when we've received too much or given too little. They ring when we don't keep our word. We have that. And I think, there's been so much remarkable evidence showing that, we're hardwired to care, we're hardwired to be fair. So we're connecting like that, but also, and we're connecting back with who we really are. But the other thing that's so interesting is how contagious generosity is. I think that was the thing that really overwhelmed me, that when you've got a culture of selfishness like we do now, when you change the currency and make it generosity, the game starts to change. And it begins to become absolutely viral. As I demonstrate in my book by that one woman who was tired of her office and its culture of selfishness and greed. So she began to leave change in the Coke machine every day and just wrote a little card saying, "Your Coke's been paid for. Keep the spirit alive and pay it forward." Well, it completely freaked out her audience at first. They started wondering who this, they set up a spy network to try to figure out who the Secret Santa was. But then after a while, when she started leaving donuts on another floor, when she got wind of this, it changed the conversation. It was the only conversation at the dinner table for all of those employees for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it started changing the culture. Something as simple as just being truly generous. As you say, you become authentic. You know that that's your gift, but also you're giving the gift of generosity to everyone else and starting to create that framework of fairness.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Totally, yeah.
So what about... Go ahead.
It's just so easy, because we can, we feel like, humanity's been like this for thousands of years, we're not going to change. It's true, we've been like this for thousands of years, but it's so easy to change our behavior. If we just get inspired, anybody can change anything overnight. It just requires a choice.
Yes. The thing, too, is that not all cultures operate the way we do. We keep thinking that this is the way life is. I mean, scientists have been telling us, even our genes are selfish. We were born to be selfish. But the new science, there's so much evidence demonstrating that's not really who we are. We're something much, much better than that, and we tap into that. When we do things as you suggest, we start tapping into that.
Yeah. Well,
you've interviewed so many close people in really close relationships. What was it in there? And you've got that series. What was the name of that series that you've done on relationships?
It's called TheDeeperLove.com. The Deeper Love. If anyone just goes to that website, TheDeeperLove.com, it explains everything there.
Wonderful. Well, you've got this wonderful thing. You interviewed so many successful couples. Can you isolate one thing that you can tell our audience about that was the thing that most characterized individual behavior that led to successful relationships? What thing in their consciousness in individuals really led to that?
I think the most powerful, the most incredible thing, the pivotal key to relationship that is not just successful but ecstatic, I mean mind-blowingly ecstatic. And I can testify, I'm in a marriage myself where, I'm just, every time I look at her I almost faint. I'm just so overwhelmed by the beauty and the majesty and the depth of this woman, and luckily it's reciprocal. She likes me too. So the key is to take relationships beyond codependency, beyond processing, and beyond even enjoyment and celebration into the realm of worship. Right? Now, what this means is, people really get freaked out when I talk about this, but it comes back to this thing I was saying. When Jesus said, "I am the Father are one," is Jesus the exception or the example? If Jesus can say, "I am the Father are one," and if we're willing for Jesus to be our teacher, then anybody actually has the possibility to discover where I am the Father are one. So everybody can discover within themselves the dimension where there is no barrier between me and God. It's like God is using this body to experience life. Now, we turn the attention from me to the other. and we look at the person we're married to, not at them, not at their face, at their form, or at their habits, or at their condition, or at their listening to their accent. We don't look at any of that. We look through all of that. So you look into your partner's eyes through the appearance of separation into the dimension which is limitless. And it's like your partner becomes a window. All you've got to do, I'll tell you in a minute how to do this, but it's very simple how anybody right now, I mean within 5 minutes of this call ending, anybody can open this up. It's very simple. But you look into your partner's eyes, through your partner's eyes, like it's a window, and you discover a dimension which is limitless, which is free. And we're not saying that your partner is behaving like the divine all the time. Your partner may be angry, catty, critical, bitching, all kinds of things. Your partner may be abusive, all sorts of things. But if you can look through all that conditioning into the essence, you will discover that you got married to God. It's shocking, but you discover that actually you are married to the divine. Even though the divine is carefully wrapped in layer upon layer upon layer of conditioning, which is maybe ugly, nevertheless, at the essence, there is the divine. Now, what we need to do is to, through discipline, to start to pay more attention to that dimension. Through discipline, we start to discipline ourselves to practice worship in relationship, right? To practice worship in relationship. And then when worship becomes mutual, the worship that we have in the church is one-way street. I worship God. God doesn't worship me back, you see. I worship a guru. The guru doesn't worship me back. But when it's in a marriage, you worship the divine in each other. You don't do this all day long. You can do it just in a few minutes in the morning. Just like pay attention to that. And you realize that, yes, there's the control. Yes, there's the cutting off. Yes, there's the criticism. Yes, there's the cruel words. But those are all conditioning. Those are all conditioning that will arise, but that can be forgiven and overlooked. And at the essence of that is this divine core. If you can tune into that, then just for a few minutes, I really mean it, you don't even want to do it for longer than that. It's like homeopathic medicine. A little bit goes a long way. Just 5 minutes in the morning will actually transform your whole relationship, your whole life, you know. Now, I was going to say the way to start with that, very simple. If you're married, if you're in a relationship, just sit opposite your partner for 5 minutes. The way to start it, just sit opposite your partner for 5 minutes and just look into your partner's eyes without saying or doing anything, just with curiosity. Just ask yourself the question, who is actually looking back at me? Who is looking back at me? And I'm going to say very briefly, because this is a huge topic, if what I've just said now about relationship as worship, if that gets interesting for anybody, go to thedeeperlove.com and register. There's a little place where you can register, thedeeperlove.com, and it will automatically generate, I think, 5 or 6 email every few days, and it has all of these practices will be sent to you for free on how you can cultivate this in your day-to-day life.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I love that tool, too, the ideas of just looking and asking the question. Now, what about the work that you've been doing with Living Awakening? Can you talk a little bit about that and how that relates to developing these tools for a new world individually and fairness specifically?
Sure. So first of all, let's just speak very briefly what we mean by awakening, okay? Awakening means to recognize the dimension of you which has no limits, okay? So just now, as you're listening to this, you can hear sounds, but something is hearing the sound, right? You can see shape, color, texture. Something is seeing the shapes and the texture and the color. Just now, you can feel all of this around you. Who is experiencing all this? Now, we don't have time to really go into that in more depth, but on Living Awakening site, there's some guidance on this. Who is experiencing all of this, right? When we drop into discovering that, when we just drop into discovering who is actually experiencing all of this happening, who is experiencing this moment, right? We discover that which is hearing the sounds is actually silence. It must be, you see. That which is hearing sounds is silence. That which is feeling texture is actually empty, is formless. That which is noticing thoughts is awareness. To recognize this dimension of yourself, even in a snapshot, is called awakening. We could say a lot more about that, but we've only got a few minutes, so let's just leave it at that. And if you want to know more, livingawakening.com. But so many people have discovered that dimension of themselves in the last, say, 20 years. Just bear testimony to the fact, that Eckhart Tolle with Oprah did a teleseries about awakening. Yeah, 4 million people listen. So there's a lot of people interested in awakening now. And many people I've discovered, almost everybody has had at least a taste of this dimension of themselves which is free, which is limitless, which was never born, which could never die, which is really one with the divine. By now, so many people have access to that dimension of themselves, right? But here's the thing, very simple. A lot of people are interested in and oriented towards awakening, but are not particularly it's not particularly associated with your life being functional. So many people who get really involved in meditation, they sort of lose their edge a little bit for making their life glorious and magnificent. And then there's a lot of other people who are really interested in material success. And those are the people who bought The Secret, and they get interested in, business and success and all of that. And so there's been this idea for thousands of years that you have to choose between inner awakening and outer fulfillment. So in many traditions, you had the choice to be a householder or a monk, or a recluse, right? And that idea of having to choose, Jesus said it's easier for a rich man for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Buddha said many things of the same line. So we've been very much conditioned to believe that we have to choose between the inner and the outer. Now, what I've discovered through doing a lot of interviews is not only is that not true today, but the very opposite is actually the case. So not only is it not true, but in fact, what I've discovered is people who are really, 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 really successful in a multidimensional way, they're really giving their gift big time, full on, really making a huge impact on the planet. Those people actually have a secret spiritual dimension to their lives, that they don't usually talk about, but nevertheless their gifts arose out of this dimension. Jack Canfield's a great example with 100,000 copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul. The whole thing arose out of deep meditation. People don't know about the secret spiritual life of Steve Jobs, or
Richard Branson. Yeah.
Richard Branson. So a lot of these people, they have a spiritual dimension which is not generally talked about, right? So the first thing is, it's interesting, is actually effortless success, easy success, when things flow to you easily, it actually arises out of their spiritual dimension. But the other side is also really interesting. Stuart Emery is one of the greatest living experts on excellence, the study of excellence, right? And Stuart Emery has discovered that people who have really cultivated excellence in their lives, whether it's excellence being a hairdresser or excellence being a violinist or excellence as a businessman, people who have really cultivated excellence in their lives, actually spontaneously, their excellence becomes a spiritual practice. And people who have cultivated a high degree of excellence at anything start to have experiences of limitlessness. So what I'm discovering is that living your life fully and awakening are not two separate things. They actually are the foundation for each other. And I've been able to interview now dozens of eminently successful and well-known people about this relationship between awakening and worldly success. And that's the course, Living Awakening. You can find out about it at livingawakening.com. You just go there, register, and again, you get a series of little gifts that give you some feeling for it, and it's actually a course you can also take online.
Well, that is wonderful. Can you give us one or two tools just to finish up our very, very quick hour?
Sure.
Give us one tool that people can use from Living Awakening that gives them an idea of effortless success.
Sure. So, the most fundamental tool is to integrate into your life the question, who is experiencing this moment? Okay? So just remember those words, who is experiencing this moment? So when you hear a sound, instead of the attention going out to the sound and velcroing onto the sound, ask yourself, who heard that sound? Who is it who actually heard the sound? Try to find the hearer. When you see the movement of an object in your line of vision, instead of the attention going out and velcroing onto the object, bring the attention back and find out who notice that movement, who notice that color, who notice that shape, who is aware. And you develop a curiosity, a genuine curiosity to try and find the real me, to try and find the real essence of who you are, okay? And that, you see, that's the golden key. The great sage Ramana Maharshi, who lived in India until 1950, who many regard as, the pioneer of contemporary spirituality, this was his whole teaching. Who am I? He said, you don't need to worry so much about meditation or practice or teaching. Just find out who you are. Find out who you really are, deeper than the layers of conditioning, deeper than the layers of remembering and forgetting, deeper than the layers of like and dislike. Who are you really? Who is aware of all the mental activity? When you discover that dimension of yourself, bingo, in that moment you're free. And the conditioning may come back again, but any time you fully focus on that question, who am I? In that moment that you focus on that question, you are set free. You might need to be bound and set free and bound and set free and bound and set free 100,000 times, 100 million times. But what is guaranteed is any moment that you really ask with total curiosity, who am I? In that moment, the question is complete liberation, and in that moment, you are one with God.
That's absolutely brilliant. That is fantastic. And I really encourage people to connect with your Living Awakening. Give us the website again, Arjuna.
Livingawakening.com. Livingawakening.com. Simple.
I really encourage people to follow up with this, because it sounds like, as with all of the work you do, it really is breakthrough material about how to recreate the bond for yourself. What kinds of tools are necessary to reach out and to experience interconnectedness and oneness in every aspect of your life. So that sounds particularly intriguing because, as you say, we have this disconnect, this idea that in order to have material success, we are somehow not spiritual, and spirituality is somehow equated with poverty. And hopefully this will be a wonderful message also for people experiencing so many economic challenges now, because it really makes you look back to source and look at what it is you're broadcasting to the world. Well, as I probably suspected, Arjuna, this has been way too short a time. We probably could go on for hours, as we do personally anyway.
It's true, isn't it?
I want to thank you so much for being part of this summit and sharing so much of your wisdom about fairness, about making the bond, about the tools that you need individually to really understand that, to make a new world, and to create fairness for yourself and for your life. So I really want to honor you for your work. And once again, everybody, please check out his various websites. Arjuna's websites, livingawakening.com, and the one for relationships was?
thedeeperlove.com.
Deeperlove.com.
And my blog, where I'm fairly prolific on my blog, is just arjunaardagh.com. So
Arjuna Ardagh, wonderful. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Let me just squeeze in a little back at you, because I think the work you're doing, Lynne, it's mind blowing. I mean, everything you've brought forward, from the field to the intention experiment to this new book, it's all just mind blowing stuff. And I just so deeply respect your mixture of sanity and inspiring vision. There are so many people with inspiring visions who are frankly a little woo-woo, and there are so many, there are so many people who are very sane and sober, but they kind of lack an edge. And you've got this incredible mixture of being grounded, doing good research, really paying attention to what's real, and really holding this incredible vision. So I just bow to you 100,000 times.
Oh, thank you. Well, and the bow is returned for your wonderful work as well. And thank you, everybody, for listening in on this segment of our Fairness Summit. And we look forward to having you join us again. Thanks so much.